All right, what is up, you guys, and welcome back to my second of my ocean liner history series. Now, ever since I've started doing YouTube, I've always wanted to do videos like these because I've always had a fondness and just a love for old ocean liners, specifically 19th and 20th century ocean liners, and I thought that I would share my love with you guys so that way y'all can maybe research these and get to love these as much as I do. So we went over the history of the White Star Line, um, ships from 1887 all the way up until they went bankrupt in 1932. Um, Now, you might be thinking that the Titanic, one of the most famous and luxurious and biggest ships of that time, is my favorite ship. Well, it's actually not. It's actually her sister ship, her less well known sister ship, the RMS Olympic. Now, if you don't know what RMS stands for, it stands for Royal Mail Steamer. These ships also doubled as mail carriers. Just so you know, just a little fun fact for you guys. So I guess we will get into the history of her shortly, and a fun little cameo is going to come up a little later in the video, and it has something to do with the Titanic and her sinking, surprisingly. So we'll get into that soon here in a minute after I go sit in my recliner here. Move everything around. Okay, now we're good. So let's get into the history of the RMS Olympic. So the RMS Olympic was launched, let's see here, on October 20th, 1910. Now, please ignore any of the other screenshots that I have. But the Olympic was launched on October 20th, 1910. And during her building process, she was built by the same company that built the Titanic. And she was inducted into the same shipping company, the White Star Line. And she was built by Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Ireland, which is this little town in Ireland where Harland and Wolff built all of their ships, from the Atlantic to the Titanic and the Olympic to all the way up until the Georgiac and the Britannic, those later motor vehicle ships that were the last two ships that were ever built by the White Star Line. So this is one of the first of two photos of the two ships that are actually photographed together. On the left is the RMS Titanic. It doesn't look like sorry, I can't speak today. It doesn't look like the Titanic yet, and that is because they had just started building her, and she was still kind of in that raw, kind of still in that superstructure stage. They hadn't put any of her machinery in yet. They hadn't even built her hull. They haven't even hammered the rivets in yet. However, if you look on the right, the Olympic looks much more finished. She's not actually white because this picture was taken around 1910. It is black and white. The ship is not actually white. It is black on the top, and where that line kind of meets, where it goes from white to black, that kind of grayish black part is actually red. And that red part is where, from the white part, where you see that line, from the white part down is where she was in the water. So you wouldn't see that red part at all. So if she was docked in port, you wouldn't see that red part at all. All you would see is just the red, is just not the red, but the black and gold trim, which to very many people of this time looked marvelous and beautiful, at least to them. It looks very marvelous and beautiful to me also. So this is one of the two only pictures of her and the Titanic that were taken together during their building phase at Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Ireland. And you can see, like I said, the Olympic is very much close to being finished. She's about to be launched, and they've pretty much completed her entire hull here. You can see where that hole is right there, that really big oval looking hole. That's where her anchor is going to go. You can see her nameplate right here, and that crane right there is what they're going to use to carry the rich people's vehicles up onto the ship down into the cargo holds with. That's the crane. That's the crane that they're going to use. So let's go into our next photo. If I can zoom out here. Sorry. If I can, wrong photo. If I can go into, so she was launched on October 20th, 1910. During this time, I think it was about 1,000 people who showed up to her launching. It may have been more, because when the Titanic was launched about a year after the Olympics. So a ship of this magnitude, a ship of this size being launched around this time was very, very uncommon, and a lot of people showed up and paid admission to see her get launched. And the launch went very successful. She did not get stuck at all. They did not have to wait another day like the SS Great Eastern, which is another ship that I will be going over here soon in the future. She did not get stuck like the SS Great Eastern. The launch went very well, and a lot of people were very, very excited to see this ship in its prime, to see it carry its full capacity, and to see it sail and steam the Atlantic Ocean like it was intended to. And this is the very last picture that the Olympic and the Titanic will be photographed in together. On the right here is the Olympic after her fitting out service. Well, not her fitting out service. This is the Olympic after she was hit by the HMS Hawk, and she is in port in Southampton being repaired from this collision with this Royal Navy vessel. Now, when she hit this Royal Navy vessel, she was actually captained by Captain Edward J. Smith, which is the captain of the ship on the left here, the RMS Titanic. If I can zoom in on her right here, that's the Titanic. Captain Edward J. Smith will command this ship about a year later. This picture was taken in 1911, I believe. So, on the left, you've got the Olympic. On the right, you've got the Titanic. The Titanic has just finished her fitting out, and she's about to begin her sea trials, and she's going to go out and start ferrying passengers to New York. Well, she's going to go ferry passengers to the middle of the ocean and then sink with about 1,500 lives lost. Still very sad, but this is the only picture of the two ships that was taken together, other than let me go back. Other than this picture right here, this is the only other picture of the ships taken together, and this is the very last time that they will be photographed together before the Titanic goes off on her maiden voyage and sinks on April 14th, 1912. Now, on April 14th, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg and was stuck in the middle of the ocean, sinking with thousands of passengers aboard. They were scared, they were stranded, they didn't know what to do. Out of 20,000 passengers, only 700 survived and were picked up by the Carpathia, which is another ship that I will be going over here soon in the future about her history. 700 passengers were picked up by the Carpathia and were taken to New York and were very, very shaken up at what they had just seen. Now, when they began sending out distress signals, the wireless operators, I don't remember their names, but the two wireless operators, which the ship only had two, they began sending out the ZQD signals, which was the standard maritime distress signal used at that time. But as the sinking worsened and the ship continued to deteriorate, they used the SOS signal, which was relatively new at the time for 1912. So they began using the SOS signal. The Olympic still can't speak today. The Olympic received both the ZQD signals and the SOS signals and tried at her best to reach the Titanic. Now, these two ships were very, very similar. They both kind of had the same style, the same layout, the same interior structure, the same interior layout, and they both had the same speed. So the Titanic's speed was about 25 knots, 26 knots if they really pushed the engines. The Olympic speed was 25 knots, 26 if they really pushed the engines. So the Olympic is racing her hardest, trying her hardest to get to her sister, to save her sister from sinking, and she's going as fast as she can to get to the ship. While the Titanic is sinking and further sinking lower and lower into the ocean. So by the time the Olympic got remotely where she was, the Titanic was no longer there. It had already slipped beneath the Atlantic Ocean, but the Olympic did try her best to save some of the passengers. Although she was not able to, she still made an effort to save some of the passengers, and for me, I'd say that's a pretty good effort. Now, over here we have her shortly after April 14th during her peacetime service. And from 1912, from when she was launched in 1911 to when she rescued some of the Titanic passengers, and from when she was drafted into World War I service, or I should say conscripted into World War I service, she had a very prosperous and very successful career as a maritime ocean liner cruiser. She ferried over 20,000 passengers to and from New York to Southampton, and from Southampton to New York and back, which is the same route that the Titanic was going to use if she didn't sink. Now, this next picture is of her during her wartime service. So when World War I broke out in 1914, the Olympic and her sister ship, the Britannic, they were part of this class called the Olympic class, and the Olympic was the flagship of this class. The Britannic and the Olympic both became a troop ship and a hospital ship, respectively, with the Britannic becoming a hospital ship and the Olympic becoming a troop ship. The Olympic, for self-defense against U-boats and other German destroyers, was armed with 12-inch cannons, and hold on, because I've got a screenshot over here of what weapons she had. So if I can find that real quick. Well, I deleted it, but she was armed with 14.7 and 12-inch guns for self-defense on her bow here. So you can't see them now because the image is in very low quality, but right about a little forward of the mast was where her guns were. And these were mainly for self-defense against U-boats if they surfaced, and against small destroyers. And she actually had an incident during World War I in which the crew was on the bridge, and one of the officers spotted a U-boat, and the U-boat made the mistake of surfacing. So her gunners, which consisted of about 10 men, aimed at this U-boat and began firing all of her guns. At the same time, the Olympic speeds up to her maximum speed. She rams into the U-boat and cuts it clean in half. The German U-boat crew blows her ballast tanks, letting her sink, and the crew of the U-boat scuttles her completely as the U-boat sinks. And the Olympic, she doesn't stop to pick up any survivors. She doesn't shoot at anybody in the water, but she keeps on going to her destination, which was probably to pick up troops or load off troops. I will be right back, you guys. I've got to go eat dinner. So this is the Olympic shortly after her wartime service was over. So when World War I was over in 1916, she was taken back to Southampton to have her war paint scrubbed off, and she was again refitted and retextured for peacetime service. Now, she carried, her maximum capacity was about 20,000 troops, which she carried around 20,000 to 20,500 Canadian troops back to Canada. And a lot of these Canadian troops were very, very happy to go home, and many of them said, "This is the ship that brought me home. I'm so glad. You know, we've been through so much during this war, and we are so glad that this ship that has served both the passengers who served on her before and us, we are glad that she served us so well. If I had the picture on here, I would show y'all the newspaper clipping of a soldier who said, "This is the ship that brought me home." So she served from the end of World War I all the way up until 1935, where she was shortly scrapped after the White Star Line went bankrupt. Now, after the White Star Line went bankrupt, the Olympic, she wasn't sold to anybody else. Nobody auctioned her. Nobody bought her. Not even Kennard didn't even buy her. And Kennard is still a functioning ocean company to this day, and they didn't even bother to fiddle with her. They didn't buy her anything. And I'm not saying anything about that shipping company. I love it, but they didn't bother to buy her. So she was laid up in a barn, and a lot of her fittings are in a lot of hotels, a lot of museums, a lot of Irish homes, and you can actually visit a couple of the museums. I'm not sure where they're located, but you can visit a lot of the museums where her original fittings are stored, and you can take a peek at them. If you wish. That's going to be it for today's video. I will see y'all later.